Jason had always felt like an outsider in his own life. A life that seemed normal from the outside, working a mundane 9-to-5 job, hanging out with friends, living in a small but cozy house with his mom. Yet, there was a secret that Jason kept buried deep within, a secret so deeply entwined with his very being that he couldn't imagine anyone ever finding out. He didn't want anyone to know about the quiet moments when he'd sneak into his mom's closet, slip on one of her dresses, and stare at himself in the mirror. The reflection was a mystery, something he couldn't fully explain, yet couldn't deny either. Was it curiosity, or was there something deeper, a longing for something that he couldn't name? But everything changed one afternoon, on a day that Jason never saw coming. It was just another normal day. His mom had gone out to run some errands, and he had the house to himself. In the solitude of their small, lived-in home, Jason decided to indulge in his usual quiet rebellion. This time, however, there was no going back. With the soft click of his mother's bedroom door closing behind him, Jason picked out a dress, a beautiful vintage floral number that had always caught his eye. As he slipped it on, something inside him ignited. For a moment, he felt an unfamiliar sense of peace wash over him, the weight of his hidden desires mingling with a strange but undeniable excitement. It wasn't just the fabric against his skin or the way the dress made him feel, it was something about being in that moment. But little did Jason know, that peaceful moment would be the beginning of a nightmare. As he twirled in front of the mirror, admiring his reflection for a brief second, the door to the house swung open. His mother's voice echoed through the hallway, and Jason's heart sank. She was home early. His stomach twisted in panic. His secret, his deepest fear, was moments away from being exposed. In that instant, he realized just how much he had underestimated his mother. She wasn't just any ordinary woman. She had always been sharp, always seemed to know more than she let on. And today, it seemed she was ready to confront him about everything. "Jason," her voice cut through the air, cool and measured. "What are you doing in my clothes?" Jason's breath caught in his throat. He felt like a deer caught in headlights. He wanted to explain, to tell her that it was an accident, that it wasn't what it looked like, but the words wouldn't come. His heart pounded against his chest, and all he could think about was how he might escape the whirlwind of emotions threatening to consume him. But his mother was far from naive. She had seen through his facade long before he'd even realized it. And now, with one simple question, she had him cornered. "So this is your little secret, huh? Dressing up in my clothes, pretending to be something you're not?" Jason's mind raced, his emotions a storm of fear and shame. What was she going to do now? Would she throw them out? Would she tell everyone about the strange feelings he'd never been able to understand? Jason braced himself for the worst. But instead of anger, Jason saw something in his mother's eyes, a look that chilled him to his core. It wasn't pity. It wasn't disappointment. It was something darker, something far more unsettling. "I think it's time for you to really understand what it feels like to live as someone else," she said slowly, her voice dripping with something Jason couldn't quite place. "I think it's time for you to see what it feels like to walk in my shoes." And that was when Jason's world turned upside down. Jason stood in front of the mirror, his heart racing as he stared at the reflection of himself, an image that both thrilled and terrified him. He had done it before, but this time was different. The stakes felt higher. His mother's words echoed in his mind. "You're going to be my perfect girl, Jason. It's only a matter of time before you accept it." He had always known there was something strange about his mother's intentions. From a young age, she had dressed him up in clothes that didn't belong to him, made him practice walking in heels, and even had him wear makeup, claiming it was just a game. But the line between a game and reality had blurred long ago. Jason never thought he would go this far, this deep into her twisted game. His mother's control over him was suffocating. Yet, when she laid down a wager, telling him he couldn't go a day without obeying her orders, something inside him had snapped. He had accepted, thinking he could outwit her. But now, as the clock ticked down, he realized he wasn't sure anymore. The anticipation of being caught was a heavy weight on his shoulders. He couldn't help but feel a twisted sense of excitement mixed with dread. Every part of him screamed to stop, to break free from the trap his mother had set. But the thrill, the desire to prove himself to her, kept him going. Would he truly lose himself in this? Would he become the girl his mother always wanted him to be? As Jason's fingers trembled, he reached for the dress laid out on the bed, a soft, flowing gown, shimmering in the light of the late afternoon sun. The satin felt foreign against his skin, yet familiar in its own haunting way. He slid it on, feeling the tightness around his chest as the fabric stretched and clung to his body. For a moment, he couldn't breathe. The reality of the situation hit him like a slap. This wasn't just playing dress-up anymore. Next came the makeup. Jason reached for the foundation, concealer, and blush tools that had once seemed alien to him. But now, they felt almost natural. His hands worked quickly, applying layer after layer. He adjusted his lipstick, and the final touch, a wig, was placed delicately over his own short hair. As the wig settled into place, he took a step back and surveyed the transformation. The girl in the mirror looked like someone else entirely, someone he didn't recognize. How could he have gotten here? The girl staring back at him had long, silky hair, soft features, and a look of uncertainty in her eyes. He barely recognized her as himself. In some twisted way, the transformation felt empowering. He had never seen himself this way before, but in another, deeper part of him, a dark sense of dread built. He couldn't stop the tears that welled up in his eyes. There was no turning back now. The door creaked as it opened. Jason's heart stopped. He rushed to the window, peering out at the driveway. She's coming home early. Panic set in. He had only a few minutes left to get everything back to normal, but his mind was racing. His mom was already suspicious of his behavior, and now the house was about to become a minefield of nerves and secrets. How was he going to undo everything in time? He quickly tore the dress off, his fingers fumbling as he tried to change back into his regular clothes. But the process felt strange. Everything was happening too fast. His mind was a whirlpool of confusion. As his heart pounded, the pressure of the situation tightened around him like a vice. He had done something irreversible. But before he could finish undressing, a knock echoed from the door. Jason froze. His mother was home. Jason's heart was pounding as he stood frozen in place, unable to move. His hands were still covered in makeup, and his body was still partially dressed in his mother's clothes. The doorbell rang again, louder this time, echoing through the house like a ticking clock. Tick-tock, tick-tock. The seconds were slipping away. In a panic, Jason glanced around the room, his mind searching for any way out of this nightmare. But there was no escape. The walls were closing in. His mother's footsteps grew louder as she approached the front door. Then it hit him: Emma. His girlfriend, his ally, his confidant. She had no idea what he'd been doing, and now Jason realized he had made a mistake by not telling her about his struggle. This secret could ruin everything between them. If she found out, it would be the end of their relationship. Jason had already begun imagining the disgust and betrayal in her eyes. The door swung open with a creak, and before he could hide, Emma appeared in the doorway. She looked at him, and her eyes widened in disbelief. Jason stood there, caught in the act, his face flushed with panic. "Jason," Emma whispered, her voice a mixture of confusion and concern. "What is going on?" Jason's heart hammered in his chest. The ground seemed to shift beneath his feet as he struggled to find his voice. His throat felt dry, his stomach twisted into knots. He hadn't been prepared for this moment. I didn't mean for you to find out like this," Jason stammered, his voice trembling. Emma didn't say anything at first. She stood there silent, studying him with a look of utter disbelief. Her gaze moved from his makeup-streaked face to the dress, still hanging half-finished on his body. The tension between them was thick, suffocating. "Jason, what's happening? Why are you dressed like this?" Jason wanted to run. He wanted to hide, to forget this entire situation. But he knew he couldn't. He had crossed the line. There was no turning back now. "Emma," he said softly, his voice cracking, "this is a mistake. I never meant for it to get this far. Then why are you doing this? Emma asked, her voice rising with emotion. Why didn't you tell me? Tears welled up in Jason's eyes as he realized how much he had hurt her. He could see the hurt in her eyes, and it shattered him. He had been so caught up in his own fear of being discovered that he hadn't realized how much Emma meant to him. She was the only one who had ever truly accepted him for who he was until now. I'm sorry, Jason whispered, his voice thick with emotion. I never wanted to hurt you. I just didn't know how to deal with everything. My mom, she's forcing me into this. I didn't want this. I never wanted to lose you, Emma. For a moment, Emma said nothing. Her expression softened, but the pain in her eyes remained. I don't know what to say, she finally said, her voice strained. This is a lot. I need time to think. I can't just act like nothing's wrong. Jason nodded, his heart heavy. He had done what he feared most, he had lost her. As Emma turned to leave, Jason's heart sank, but then something unexpected happened. She paused in the doorway, turning back to him one last time. Her eyes locked onto his, and for the first time, Jason saw something that wasn't anger or disappointment, it was understanding. A moment of clarity passed between them. I don't know if I can accept this, Jason, Emma said quietly. But I will try. For you. For us. The door closed softly behind her, leaving Jason alone with his thoughts. For a long time, he stood there, staring at the closed door, his heart racing. Could he truly be the person his mother wanted him to be? The realization hit him like a ton of bricks. He had spent his entire life running from who he truly was. But now, for the first time, he understood something. He wasn't just running from his mother. He had been running from himself. As Jason stood there, lost in thought, a voice broke through the silence. It was his mother, standing in the doorway with a smirk on her face. She had been watching the entire exchange. Well, she said coldly, her voice dripping with satisfaction. It seems like you finally made your choice. You're mine now, Jason. There's no escape. Jason turned to face her, his body tense with rage and frustration. He had tried to fight it, tried to escape. But his mother had always known how to reel him back in. You can't control me forever, Jason said, his voice trembling with a mix of anger and fear. I'm done. But his mother just laughed, a cruel, mocking sound that sent shivers down his spine. Is that so? She said, stepping closer. We'll see about that, won't we? As her words lingered in the air, Jason realized that this was the point of no return. He had been caught between two worlds, the boy he used to be and the girl his mother wanted him to become. Now there was no escaping it. Jason stood there, his heart pounding as his mother approached him, her eyes narrowed with a mix of contempt and triumph. She had always been a force to be reckoned with, and now it felt as though she was closing in on him. The walls seemed to close in around him, trapping him in a nightmare of his own making. Do you really think you can defy me, Jason? His mother's voice was low and menacing. You think you can just walk away from this, from everything I've done for you? The sacrifices I've made to shape you into something better. Jason clenched his fists, his anger bubbling to the surface. I'm not your puppet. I never was. I've had enough of this. Enough of you controlling me. His mother's laugh echoed in the room, a sharp, cruel sound that sent chills down his spine. You think you can break free? You think I'll let you go that easily? She sneered. You're mine, Jason. You always have been. I built you, I molded you, and now you're going to pay for your disobedience. Jason took a step back, his mind racing. He could feel the pressure mounting, the weight of his situation threatening to crush him. But something inside of him snapped. He couldn't take it anymore. The years of manipulation, the years of living in fear of his mother's control, it all hit him like a tidal wave. I'm not going to let you win. Jason spat, his voice firm for the first time in what felt like forever. I'm done being your pawn. His mother's eyes flashed with fury, and she took a step forward, her fingers curling into fists. You think you can just walk away? You think you can change who you are? Jason's chest tightened with fear, but he stood his ground. He knew this moment was coming, but he wasn't sure he was ready for it. His heart raced, his hands trembled, but he couldn't back down. He had to fight. "I'm done being what you want me to be," Jason said through gritted teeth. "I'm going to be who I am, whether you like it or not." For a moment, the two stood there, locked in a tense standoff, neither one willing to back down. The silence between them was suffocating, but Jason refused to break. He had reached his breaking point. Then, without warning, his mother lunged at him, her hands grabbing him by the shoulders and forcing him back against the wall. Jason gasped in shock, his breath coming in ragged bursts as his mother's grip tightened. "Don't you dare think you can escape me," she hissed, her voice cold and venomous. "You belong to me, Jason, and I will make sure of it." Jason struggled against her, his mind racing as he tried to free himself. But his mother was stronger than he had anticipated, and her grip felt like iron. His vision blurred, and for a moment he felt like he was suffocating. The walls seemed to close in around him, trapping him in a nightmare he couldn't escape. But then something inside of him snapped. With a burst of strength, Jason shoved his mother off him, sending her stumbling backward. He gasped for air, his lungs burning as he backed away from her. His heart was racing, his hands trembling, but he couldn't stop now. He had to keep going. "You think you can just walk away from me?" his mother yelled, her voice filled with rage. "You think I'll let you go so easily?" Jason didn't answer. He couldn't. His mind was too clouded with fear, with anger, with the overwhelming desire to escape. He needed to get away. He needed to find a way out of this hellish nightmare. But as he turned to leave, he heard her voice again. "Don't think you can run forever, Jason," she said, her voice soft now, almost a whisper. "I'll always be here, waiting for you." Jason froze in place, his blood running cold. Her words sent a chill down his spine. He knew she wasn't just talking about the house, the walls, the physical space. She was talking about something deeper, something far more sinister. His mother wasn't going to let him go. Not now, not ever. As he stood there, his hand on the door handle, he heard something else, something that made his heart skip a beat. A car engine, the sound of a car starting up, and then the screech of tires as it sped down the driveway. "Emma." Jason's heart leaped in his chest. He turned to face his mother one last time, but she was already gone, disappearing into the shadows of the house. And just as quickly as she had entered, she was gone. He ran out of the house, his feet pounding against the ground as he sprinted toward the driveway. His mind raced as he saw Emma's car disappearing down the street, the taillights fading into the distance. No, he couldn't let her go. Not like this. With all his strength, Jason pushed himself harder, running faster, his breath coming in gasps. The night air was cold against his skin, but he didn't care. He had to catch up with her. He had to make her understand. As he rounded the corner, he saw the car in the distance. It was moving too fast, but Jason couldn't give up. He pushed his body to its limits, his heart pounding in his chest. The sound of his footsteps echoed in his ears, and for a moment he felt as though the entire world was against him. But then, in a split second, something changed. He caught up with her. Just in time. To be continued.